too long, her stories have been buried, and her truth edited by a world that feared her power. You're listening to Sovereign Reality with Natalie. We are here to unearth the goddess because her story is your story, and her rise is your reclamation. This is about you, authentically and fully you, recognizing your own divinity and stepping back onto your throne. Because the world doesn't need you quiet, babe.
Boss ass bitch. Boss bitch. Boss ass.
Welcome back to the Sovereign Script. We are on episode 2, and we're talking about chapter 5 today. So for continuity's sake, I do want to preface this episode by stating at the close of the last one, I did say we're going to start talking about the soul's ascent. Now, we are getting the groundwork laid with this episode. However, we're not going to really get into the soul's ascent until the next chapter. So, my apologies if you are like super pumped for that with this episode. But stay tuned because it's coming. So in this episode, we're actually witnessing Mary stepping into this role as spiritual authority, and it's quite lovely. Now, this episode is going to be slightly different than the previous one. I'm going to read the chapter. It's a bit shorter because a lot of pages are missing from the manuscript. There's not a ton of verses here, and I will kind of like interject here and there, but mostly I'm going to read what's being said, and then we'll kind of like, I'll add some little bit of discussion points more toward the end of the episode. So buckle up. All right, let's get into it. So chapter 5 begins with Verse 1, and you may recall from the previous episode that Jesus had departed at the very end of the last chapter. So we begin here, and it reads, "But they were grieved. They wept greatly, saying, 'How shall we go to the Gentiles and preach the gospel of the kingdom of the Son of Man? If they did not spare him, how will they spare us?'" So these are the disciples, ugly crying, mascara running down their cheeks. And they're thinking like, how are we going to, keep living in this way, right? With this divine, knowing what we know, the divine spark within, all of this Christ consciousness that Jesus was teaching, right? We are these divine souls in human bodies, essentially, is what Jesus was teaching, that we are love. And if they don't spare Jesus, then who's to say what they're going to do to us, right? So chapter 5, verse 2 reads, "Then Mary stood up, greeted them all, and said to her brethren, 'Do not weep, and do not grieve, nor be irresolute. For his grace will be entirely with you and will protect you.'" So Mary, being the queen that she is, stands up and is basically holding center gravity in that moment. When these males are losing their minds and melting down, she's the one who is the calm in the eye of the storm. And it continues, "But rather let us praise his greatness, for he has prepared us and made us into men." Now, obviously, she's not speaking literally here, so we have to decipher what this means on a metaphysical level. So what she means here is the metaphysical man. And in this Gnostic-leaning text, becoming quote-unquote men, it just means fully human. So it doesn't refer to gender, but to the process of becoming the perfect human, if that is such a thing. Which is basically someone who has transcended material attachments and realized their divine spiritual nature. And this moment sort of establishes Mary as a leader among the disciples. The following verse reads, "When Mary said this, she turned their hearts to the good, and they began to discuss the words of the Savior." So in this context, the good represents the ultimate divine, the source of all existence. And it signifies a shift from material fear and worldly ignorance toward a realization of one's true spiritual nature. The next verse, Peter said to Mary, "Sister, we know that the Savior loved you more than the rest of women." Verse 6 reads, "Tell us the words of the Savior, which you remember, which you know, but we do not, nor have we heard them." So this moment here is interesting because it sort of paints Mary into the spiritual transmitter. And if you listened to my Mary Magdalene podcast episode, I did mention how she was often deciphering the spiritual gnosis for the disciples. She was often telling them what they meant, breaking them down for them so that they could understand the texts. So verse 7 reads, "Mary answered and said, 'What is hidden from you, I will proclaim to you.' And she began to speak to them these words. 'I,' she said, 'I saw the Lord in a vision, and I said to him, Lord, I saw you today in a vision.' He answered and said to me,'" this is verse 9 now, "'Blessed are you that you did not waver at the sight of me. For where the mind is the treasure.'" So she shares this vision that she has, with Christ, where he praises her steadiness and drops one of the most underrated mystical teachings of all Gnostic Christianity, where the mind is, there is the treasure. Translation, your consciousness is the key, not your fear, not your history, not your wounds. And then verse 10 reads, "I said to him, Lord, how does he who sees the vision see it? Through the soul or through the spirit?" So the question she asks is kind of chef's kiss metaphysics. Is vision seen through the soul or spirit, right? And the response here, I'll read it, what Jesus says, the Savior. This is verse 11. This is the last verse of this chapter, by the way, because pages 11 through 14 are missing from the manuscript. So verse 11 reads, "The Savior answered and said, He does not see through the soul nor the spirit, but through the mind that is between the two. That is what sees the vision, and it is," and that's where it cuts off. ... So basically, Jesus' answer is neither. It's the nous, the divine mind, the deep inner knowing between the two that perceives truth. This is mystical epistemology 101, babe. All right, so let's talk a little nuance here, like what's hiding between the lines. First and foremost, let's address Mary as the stabilizer, right? As I mentioned before, she was holding center gravity when the apostles were kind of having their meltdown, for lack of better words, and how quiet her authority was. It wasn't loud. It was very calm, but felt, right? It was a very felt presence. She stands up, not to dominate, but she stands up because she was the only one who was not drowning. And that is feminine leadership in its clearest. And then to recap, the "he made us into men" quote, again, she was not speaking about gender. She was saying, "He made us into fully realized humans, whole, integrated, and capable." This is what she was saying to the disciples. The disciples turned toward her. The text says she turned their hearts to the good. This implies that she wasn't just speaking to them, she was tuning them, like a spiritual, almost like a tuning fork. Peter acknowledging her intimacy with Christ. So this is important because later chapters do show some tension. But here he recognizes her as the one closest to the teacher. So pretty interesting. And then a little final note here. The missing pages are more of an invitation rather than, it's kind of how we want to look at it, right? So I'm going to choose to look at it as an invitation rather than them being lost. Gnostic texts intentionally disrupt linear logic. So the gap is a part of the teaching. It forces us, the readers, to use the very thing that Jesus highlighted, the mind between the soul and spirit. Honestly, the more that I've learned about Mary Magdalene, the more I absolutely love this queen of a woman. However, I will say that this is the chapter where she really does kind of like take her throne, right? This is where it's established her authority, her steadiness, her intimacy with Christ's teachings, her role as the one who could hold this vision while like all of these disciples are collapsing around her. And then her capacity to sort of like midwife these others back into alignment with his teachings. Like that's leadership. That is straight up like chef's kiss, mwah, leadership. Yes, queen. Yes. And it prepares us, the listeners, for the real teachings that unfold in the next chapters, which are the ascent of the soul, the confrontation with the powers, the liberation from fear. So this is sort of the hinge of the entire gospel. And Mary becomes the center of the story because she embodies the frequency that the moment requires. So if you would like to do a little grounded mystic practice with me, I invite you to place your hand on your chest. Yes, right there, where your doubts tend to gather. And take a slow breath in, like you're drawing light from somewhere just beyond the edges of the world. And feel it settle in the space between your thoughts and your ribs. The early Gnostics called this the nous, the inner chamber where clarity simply is. You can exhale whenever you need to. Just be with that breath for a couple of moments. Seeing that light as it comes in. Filling up the heart. And seeing that light as it leaves. And somewhere between the inhales and the exhales, I invite you to ask yourself quietly, where is my mind resting today? Is it resting on fear, on memory, on someone else's expectations? Or can you place it, even for a breath, on the possibility that you are already prepared? The treasure, Mary reminds us, is wherever your mind dares to dwell. Let it dwell here in this moment. Let it dwell in the you who knows. Let it dwell in courage, even if the courage trembles. Bring your awareness back to your hands on your heart. And maybe the breath. And whenever you feel ready, you can open your eyes if they were closed. And I invite you to embrace or invite in Mary Magdalene's energy and rise the way that she did, steady and unshaken. And I invite you to carry your message into a world that needs exactly your voice. So, if today's episode stirred something inside you, share it with a fellow goddess, a soul sister, or a babe ready to rise. And follow me for more sacred rebellion on TikTok and Instagram at Sovereign with Natalie. And if you're not listening to this on YouTube, I'm also over on YouTube putting out some yoga practices and what have you. Also at Sovereign with Natalie. And for deeper resources and free rituals, I invite you to sign up for my emailing list at www.sovereignsanctuary.space. So stay tuned for next week's episode. We really are going to be getting into the ascent of the soul. We're going to be talking about chapter 8, where the text shifts into one of its most profound mystical passages. What unfolds is not a moral story. It's actually more of a map of liberation. So we're going to witness desire, ignorance, and the 7 powers of wrath as living forces that question, challenge, and attempt to define the soul. So I hope to see you next week. Until then, stay sovereign.
Boss ass bitch.
Thank you for walking with me today. Remember, the goddess isn't a myth you're learning. She is a power you are remembering. So go out into the world today and take up your space. Don't filter your truth and don't apologize for who you are. I'm Natalie, and this is Sovereign Reality. Be bold and be authentically and fully you, because the world doesn't need you quiet, babe.